Usually, when we look at a piece of writing, we expect a building. We expect walls of text, a foundation of
A
introduction.
solid roof of
Right.
conclusions, right?
You walk in, and the author has just laid out all these rooms for you to explore. But occasionally you encounter something that isn't a building at all. It's just a single, incredibly dense seed.
Just sitting there in the palm of your hand.
Exactly. And you realize that an entire forest is locked inside that one tiny casing, just waiting for you to crack it open.
Hmm.
And today, we are holding a seed that is exactly 10 words long.
Just 10 words. It's incredible.
Yeah, the text you shared with us for this deep dive is, quote, Analysis of the Three Treasures of Life, Emotion, Love, and Sex, authored by Xu Feng.
It's so minimalist, it just strips away all the noise.
It really does. Since we literally only have this title, our mission today is to embark on a deep dive into the immense conceptual weight of these few words. Like, why are these specific elements framed as the ultimate treasures of human existence? And, what does an analysis of them even look like?
Right, because it forces us to look exclusively at the framing of an idea before the idea itself is even fully articulated.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because in just 10 words, the first major structural choice Xu Feng makes is calling these concepts treasures.
Yeah, that word choice is doing a lot of heavy lifting. He doesn't call them the three functions of life or the three biological drives.
Or psychological states.
Exactly. He defines them as the ultimate wealth of a human life.
Which is wild because society usually reserves the word treasure for external acquisitions, right?
Mhm.
We classify like financial security, a robust retirement account, or career achievements as our treasure.
Social status, yeah.
So framing emotion, love, and sex as the ultimate treasures completely inverts that typical human pursuit. It's basically saying your internal emotional capacity is your primary wealth, not your material accumulation. It's like a classic adventurer's treasure map, but the X is inside you.
I love that analogy. And it's a logical inversion, but man, it is incredibly difficult to actually live out.
Oh, for sure.
Like for you listening, think about your own life. How often do you categorize your internal emotional landscapes as your primary wealth? Consider how most people structure their daily routines.
We treat internal states as just kind of background noise.
Right. We treat our emotions and romantic connections as the weather that happens to us while we're out trying to acquire actual tangible things.
Like a profound moment of love is just a nice bonus if you've already had a successful day at work.
Exactly. A pleasant byproduct, not the actual goal. But by elevating emotion, love, and sex to the absolute pinnacle of a lived existence, this text demands that we treat our capacity to feel and connect as the metrics of a life well lived.
So a life without these three things is inherently impoverished no matter how much money you have.
Precisely, it's a completely different value system.
But realizing these are internal treasures creates a problem for how we usually operate. Because society tends to lump emotion, love, and sex into one messy, indistinguishable category.
Oh, yeah. We just throw it all in a bucket and call it romance.
Right. Or relationships, or passion. But Xu Feng deliberately fractures that messy category into three distinct things. So why separate them if they all deal with human connection?
Because they operate on completely different functional circuits. Like, think of it mechanically.
Okay.
Emotion is the raw electricity. It's the chaotic, undirected energy running through the walls of the human experience. It's joy, sorrow, affection, irritation.
The pure capacity to just feel anything.
Yes. Now, love is the wiring that directs that raw power toward a specific room or a specific person or a commitment.
Okay, so emotion is the power, love is the wiring. Where does sex fit in?
Sex is the light bulb turning on.
Yeah.
It's the physical, carnal manifestation of that energy. By keeping them separate in the title, the author acknowledges that these forces are distinct, even though they're inextricably linked in the broader system.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I buy that they are different circuits, but are they a ladder you have to climb?
What do you mean?
Like, do you need the raw electricity of emotion to build the wiring of love? And then do you need that love to turn on the light bulb of sex? Because in reality, people experience these three things entirely independently of one another all the time.
What's fascinating here is that grouping them together actually challenges us to look at those exact boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
You're right, they absolutely can operate independently. People experience sex without love.
And emotion without sex.
Right. But the critical tension in this title is whether they are being experienced as treasures in isolation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
When you experience the raw physical act of sex without any emotional or structural love behind it, you're experiencing a biological drive. maybe a momentary pleasure.
But not a life-defining treasure.
Exactly. Schumasang's grouping implies that while they're distinct, their ultimate value, their status as true treasures of life, relies heavily on their synthesis.
Let's dig into how that synthesis actually works, starting with the friction between emotion and love. Because if they are separate, they can oppose each other.
Oh, absolutely.
You can deeply love someone like that structural wiring is firmly in place. But your current emotional state toward them is profound disappointment or blinding anger.
And that specific fiction is exactly why separating them is so vital for maintaining a relationship. If you conflate emotion and love, then the moment you feel a surge of negative emotion, you just assume the love is broken.
You think, I am angry right now, therefore I must not love this person anymore.
Right, which destroys so many relationships. By separating them, you gain a diagnostic tool for your own internal state. You can recognize that your love treasure, the commitment part, is completely intact, even while your emotion treasure is experiencing severe turbulence.
So it allows the structural love to survive the volatile daily fluctuations of raw emotion. That's really powerful.
It is. And adding sex to that diagnostic tool is just as revealing. Society constantly struggles with where to place physical intimacy.
Yeah, we either completely conflate love and sex, saying they have to happen together always.
Or we violently tear them apart. We treat sex as purely utilitarian for reproduction, or just like a recreational dopamine hit.
But placing sex side by side with emotion and love elevates it. It says the physical, carnal reality of the human body carries the exact same philosophical weight as the ethereal concept of love.
Which fundamentally rejects historical traditions that elevate the spiritual while denigrating the physical. For centuries, philosophical and religious frameworks have taught that spiritual love is pure and physical sex is base or shameful.
So by giving sex equal billing, Xu Feng strips away the shame.
He does, but it also introduces a massive vulnerability.
How so?
Well, if sex is a foundational treasure, then neglecting it serves a critical part of the human experience. You can't just rely on deep emotional connection and structural love to carry the whole load of a relationship.
They're a load-bearing triad. If one pillar crumbles, the whole structure is compromised. Like a breakdown in physical intimacy breeds emotional resentment.
Which then erodes the structural love. Exactly. Emotion sparks the connection, love builds the secure environment, and sex physically reinforces the bond.
Which generates more positive emotion, and the feedback loop starts all over again. They constantly feed each other.
Or they constantly deplete each other when the system is failing. Their interconnectedness means a failure in one area puts immense stress on the others. You can't be exceptional at structural love, but ignore your chaotic emotional state.
And you can't have a vibrant physical connection, but lack structural commitment, and still expect to possess the full treasure.
Right. It demands holistic mastery of all three circuits.
Which perfectly sets up the methodology proposed in the very first word of the text, analysis.
Yes, the analysis.
Because if you have a complex, load-bearing system of electricity, wiring, and light bulbs, you have to inspect it. But I'll be honest, applying a cold clinical word like analysis to love, emotion, and sex feels really uncomfortable.
It does feel a bit harsh at first glance.
It feels like taking a scalpel to a butterfly. So what does this all mean? Can we actually analyze something as messy and inherently human as love or emotion without losing the magic of it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Shifafeng's title promises a structured understanding of the abstract. We instinctively associate analysis with dissection, taking something apart until it's dead on the table.
Right, which nobody wants for their romantic life.
But the application of analysis here implies an exploration of depth, not a destruction of beauty. Consider a gemologist analyzing a rough diamond.
Yeah.
They don't just stare at it and vaguely appreciate that it's shiny. They pull out a loupe. They study the cut, the clarity, the specific carbon lattice.
They map exactly how light refracts through every single facet.
Yes, and that rigorous clinical analysis doesn't make the diamond any less beautiful. It actually deepens their appreciation of its brilliance because they understand the precise mechanics of why it catches the light.
So an analysis of these treasures isn't about mapping out brain chemicals to drain the magic from human connection. It's about recognizing the facets of your own behavior.
Exactly. It suggests these treasures aren't just mysteries to be blindly experienced, but systems that can be studied and understood.
It's asking the hard mechanical questions, like, how does my baseline emotional state influence my capacity to offer love today? What specific actions replenish my emotional reserves, and what depletes them?
It's the mechanism of taking responsibility for your internal wealth. If you just blindly stumble through life, letting your raw emotions dictate your actions without ever analyzing where those emotions come from.
You're entirely at the mercy of the storm.
Right. And if you never analyze your structural love, you might be projecting your own selfish needs onto someone else and falsely calling it affection. Analyzing these treasures means recognizing them as systems that you can navigate and protect.
Let's talk about the actual mechanics of doing that in practice. Because it's one thing to say, analyze your emotions, but in the heat of a massive argument with a partner, or, in the middle of a profound depressive episode, pulling out the gemologist's magnifying glass to calmly inspect your feelings feels almost impossible.
In the acute moment of intense feeling, analysis is often impossible. The raw electricity is just surging too hard. The mechanism of analysis usually happens retroactively.
Like in the quiet aftermath?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Returning to that electrical analogy, the breaker trips, the lights go out, and you have a massive argument. The unanalyzed approach is to sit in the dark, feel angry, and blame the other person for the power outage.
Which is what we usually do.
It's the easiest reaction.
Yeah.
But the analytical approach requires you to actually go down to the breaker box. You have to trace the wires back to the source. You ask yourself, was this argument just a temporary emotional surge caused by stress at work? Or is there a fundamental flaw in the underlying wiring of the love itself?
Our core values misaligned. And tracing those wires requires a level of brutal honesty that most people actively want to avoid. Because if you trace the wire and find out the wiring of the relationship is actually faulty, you have to do the incredibly hard work of tearing open the walls to fix it.
And nobody wants to do that.
No. It is so much easier to just blame a temporary emotional surge, reset the breaker, and ignore the root cause.
Which brings us right back to why Shui Feng must define them as treasures before demanding an analysis. You wouldn't tear open the walls of your house for a few loose pennies.
Oh, wow. That's so true.
You only engage in that level of arduous, painful internal work if you genuinely believe that the payoff, a synthesized, functional state of emotion, love, and sex, is the most valuable thing you could possibly possess.
So defining them as treasures creates the necessary incentive structure for self-reflection.
Yes. You aren't analyzing your flaws to punish yourself. You're analyzing your assets to maximize and protect their value.
Protection is a huge part of this. Because if you don't know the exact composition of your emotional life, you can't guard against the things that degrade it. Burnout, cynicism, apathy, neglect, these are the rust and rot of our internal wealth.
Absolutely. Active analysis is the daily maintenance that prevents the decay of the triad.
And that applies to physical intimacy just as much as emotional connection. Though analyzing sex is something people are often deeply hesitant to do, even with long-term partners.
Oh, definitely. It feels taboo to clinicalize it.
Right. We expect physical intimacy to be this spontaneous, magical occurrence. And clinically analyzing what works and what doesn't feels like we're scheduling spontaneity and just killing the mood.
But the great paradox of analyzing physical intimacy is that understanding the mechanics actually creates the space for better spontaneity.
How so?
If you rigorously analyze the physical aspect of a relationship, like understanding what specific environments create safety, what actions generate genuine desire, how physical touch regulates the nervous system and feeds back into the emotional circuits, you aren't killing the magic.
You're building a more reliable engine to generate it.
Exactly. You're acknowledging that sex isn't just a random byproduct of a good relationship that happens when the stars align. It's an active, contributing fuel source that requires intentional maintenance.
It's a complete paradigm shift from passive experience to active curation. You aren't just a vessel that experiences love or feels emotion. You're the architect of those experiences.
Which demands an incredible amount of agency.
It really does. You're taking the irrational, chaotic, wild parts of human nature and applying a rational framework to them. Not to tame them into submission, but to ensure they function at their absolute highest capacity.
And honestly, it is staggering that we are extracting this entire behavioral framework from just a title.
10 words.
10 words map out a lifelong curriculum. It proves that a writer doesn't need a 1,000-page manifesto to convey a profound philosophy. By carefully selecting these specific terms, analysis, treasures, emotion, love, sex, and placing them in direct relation to one another, the structural logic does all the heavy lifting.
It builds a conceptual universe with absolute minimalism.
It really does.
So, for you listening, let's step back and summarize the blueprint we've just unrolled from this single seed. Su Feng's analysis of the three treasures of life, emotion, love, and sex, challenges us to completely redefine our personal wealth.
It asks us to stop looking outward for validation through material gain.
Right, and recognize that our internal capacity to feel, to commit, and to physically connect are the ultimate prizes. It fractures the messy concept of romance into a functional triad, showing us how raw emotion, structural love, and physical intimacy operate on different circuits, but must synthesize to create a complete human experience.
And finally, it dares us to pick up the magnifying glass.
Yes, to apply rigorous, honest analysis to these deeply irrational parts of our nature, not to dissect them, but to understand their mechanics, protect them from decay, and deepen our appreciation of their brilliance.
It's a demanding framework. It forces us to constantly evaluate the health of our internal systems. And, it leaves us with an incredibly important paradox to navigate as we try to apply this in our own lives.
What is the paradox?
Well, it brings us to the ultimate tension between the analytical mind and the feeling heart.
Okay, I'm listening.
If emotion, love, and sex are truly the three treasures of life to be analyzed, it begs a critical question about our daily priorities and the end goal of understanding them. Once you've successfully analyzed these treasures, once you know exactly how the light refracts through the diamond of your own heart,
Yeah.
once you understand every wire in the circuit and every mechanical trigger of your desires, does that intellectual clarity actually enhance the raw, visceral experience of feeling them? Or does the very act of mapping out the magic fundamentally change its value, turning a wild, unpredictable phenomenon into just another conquered territory?